Hello BookTube. Today I want to talk about Conan the Barbarian. One of the many BookTube events in September is the Cimmerian September, created by Michael K. Vaughan. The idea of Cimmerian September is to read Conan fiction. Now, last year the idea was to read the original Conan stories written by his creator, Robert E. Howard, who wrote and published in Weird Tales a series of stories featuring Conan the Cimmerian in the early to mid 1930s, from about 1930, 1931 to 1936, when Robert E. Howard died. For a number of decades, Conan and the rest of Robert E. Howard's work was largely forgotten, except for a few devotees. And then an editor named Lynn Carter somehow got the rights to the Conan stories, and he began to republish them and to offer his own editorial input and rewrites. And he was joined by another editor and writer named Elsbrog de Camp. And together they rewrote some of Howard's the Conan fragments that were around, as well as rewrote some of the original stories and began to write their own pastiche fiction, which other writers began to do after Carter and de Camp. So this was in the late 60s and early 70s, and then in the 70s, there was a comic book series called Conan the Barbarian from Marvel Comics, which was written by Roy Thomas, and this spawned a brief movie franchise in the early 80s, Conan the Barbarian and Conan the Destroyer, starring Arnold Schwarzenegger. And in the later 80s and into the 90s, a tour got the rights to publish Conan pastiche fiction by a number of writers, including Robert Jordan. And then in the early 2000s, another spate of the original stories, Conan stories by Robert E. Howard, began to be published by Del Rey and by Galans, even though I think one of the publishers of the pastiche fiction earlier, I don't know if it was Ace or Lancer, actually did like a collection of just the Robert E. Howard stories as he wrote them or as they were published in Weird Tales originally. And so in the early 2000s, there was more, the original stories became more readily available. A number of the pastiche fiction sort of became less available. There were a few new comic book series from different publishers, including another try with Marvel, and I'm assuming now with Titan Comics having the rights to it, or Titan Publishing, whoever they are. There's a new comic book series or series, and also new pastiche fiction coming out. So the first Cimmerian September last year was focused on the original Conan stories written by Robert E. Howard. This year, the focus is going to be shifting to the pastiche fiction. Now, in their videos, Michael K. Vaughan and Steve Donahue mentioned that they are planning to read the Lynn Carter, Elsbrog de Camp rewrites and pastiche fiction. I don't have any of those. I do not have, I've never seen them. I could probably buy them online, but I don't want to. The only, so I guess before I'm not doing this quite how I wanted to do it. So the only Conan pastiche fiction I have left are by Robert Jordan, who went on to write the Wheel of Time series. Now, my own story with Conan is I first encountered Conan through Conan the Barbarian and Conan the Destroyer, the two 1980s movies. And then I had an issue of Conan the Barbarian, the comic book, rather late in its run. And then in the 90s, I collected some of the Tor pastiche novels from Robert Jordan, Leonard Carpenter, Roland Green, Robert Maddox, I think, and maybe one or two other authors that I'm blanking on. And I eventually got rid of them before I actually began to buy the Del Rey 3-volume set of the original Robert E. Howard stories, which I also got rid of and a few years ago reacquired. So the Coming of Conan the Cimmerian, the Bloody Crown of Conan, and the Conquering Sword of Conan. However, I also wanted to pick up some of the pastiches. So I picked up two from Golden's, the used bookstore in Waco, Texas. And I know one of them was Conan the Savage by Leonard Carpenter, which I read for the first Garbogist. And while I remember enjoying the novel when I was a teenager, which is when I first sort of read the Tor, when I read the Tor pastiches, I really did not get on with the reread attempt. It was bad. It was not garbage in the kind of Garbogist, even though it is the pastiche, it meets the criteria. But it wasn't the fun kind of garbage. It was just poo. And so with my last book purge, I got rid of that one and the other pastiche. But I still have the omnibus editions of the Robert Jordan Conan pastiches. So the Conan Chronicles, which includes Conan the Invincible, which I think I've read, Conan the Defender, which I've read, and Conan the Unconquered I've read. So I think I've read all of the ones in this omnibus edition. I'm a lot less certain about the ones in the follow-up, the Further Chronicles of Conan, which includes Conan the Magnificent, Conan the Triumphant, and Conan the Victorious. I don't remember exactly if I've read these. Any of these, I don't remember. I know I've read several of the Robert Jordan ones, but I'm pretty confident I've read probably all three of these, but I'm not as confident about these. So with that in mind, I'm thinking that my Cimmerian September participation will probably be limited to one of the 6 Robert Jordan pastiches. I haven't quite decided which one. I know with like Steve and Michael are planning on doing a more thorough reading of, or more completist reading of the Carter DeCamp Conan pastiches, but I'm just going to limit myself to one novel. So I will report back on probably the last day of August or the first day of September with what that book ultimately is. Whether I want to try just a reread or try something new, I don't know. And we'll report back, obviously, during the appropriate weekly reads, whether or not the how things turn out. Because obviously, the last time I tried to read a Conan pastiche, it did not turn out well. Well, the last time I participated in Cimmerian September, it did not particularly turn out well at all either. I probably should hold off on trying to overindulge or binge. Probably if I try to read all the Conan stories from Robert E. Howard again, I probably should just read one of the collections, wait a few months, and then read another one and repeat. Or once a year or something like that, rather than all over the course of one single month, because I'm going to get burnt out, which is what happened last year. So anyway, BookTube, I will report back on which of the 6 pastiches of Robert Jordan I will be reading later. So until then, thank you. Have a great afternoon and stay safe.